Related papers 35 to 40. About the appearances of evil in the world. It isn't that the appearance of evil isn't real, it simply isn't what it seems to be. What the world calls evil has a divine purpose behind it. Sam, does that mean that God is the author of discord, disease, and death? Are you implying that God is the cause of evil? Religion says that man is the author of evil. If evil exists at all, and if God is the first cause of all, then somewhere behind the appearances of evil stands God. Oh, do you know what terrible things you're saying, you devil, you? Let us use an analogy that has been heard throughout history. I dream an awful dream and ask, who is the first author of the dream? Am I? If I am, then what of the one who created me? If I had never come into being, I'd never have created the dream for myself. But I did come into self-consciousness, and the dream may be my own creation. Yet, as awful as the dream seems, it has a divine purpose behind it, which, in a linear way, goes all the way back to the reasons for dreaming and life. What in the world could the reason for evil be? My friend, my dreams finally tell me of dreamlessness. My dreams tell me of timelessness. My dreams tell me of wakefulness. Therefore, my dreams have had a good purpose. If no more, they let me think I know when I am not dreaming. The great deception has a purpose, too, to point up deceptionless being, God being. The world of time, space, destiny, fate is the world of deception. But the world of deception is not without its limits and restraint. The restrainer is God, behind the illusion, behind the evil and awful of this world, which is also, in its subjective wholeness, a very good world. Not a single cosmology disagrees with that. There is good here to be seen and acknowledged. Whatsoever things are good and true, think on these things. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. So, there is something here to love, not despise and turn our backs on, as mysticism and metaphysics are wont to do, calling everything illusion, unreal, evil not happening. Sam, it is said that in the last days there will be someone who says that evil is good and good is evil. Aren't you doing just that? No, I'm not. I'm saying that God is the good, and there is none else but God. I am saying that the world of illusion contains much within it that is not illusion. I am saying we are here to discover the corn and the darnel and know which is which. Some men are evil then, as religion says? Within every appearance of men there is the image of God, the child, the soul, the Christ light of life, which never leaves him nor forsakes him so long as there is breath in his body. Whether his personal intention to be evil or good in the world, I am saying that the truth of subjectivity shows me that I am forever looking at my own versions of myself and my self-beliefs, all the way to infinity. Some of them are humanly good, some atrocious. It is for me, to live and do good, not evil. It is for me to make the distinctions as best I can, but it is for God to say who is alive and who is dead. If someone comes here living riotously and evilly, I would be prone to say he is spiritually dead, but only God knows that for certain. I am not his judge, even though I appear subjectively in the world to be the judge of good and evil. Confident expectation. Mr. Samuel, you write that I should look for good and confidently expect to see it. I can look for good, no problem, but to confidently expect to see it is a matter of faith, isn't it? How can I expect to see good when there is so little around? This comes from a letter extolling the virtue of apprehending God to be all in all. It is precisely because God is all in all and because God is good that one can confidently expect to see good everywhere. Nothing else can be seen in truth, can it? Eventually, we will not seem to see not good, albeit some of us may have our world ripped from under us first. But why do I see such evil in the world? Is the logical question to wonder about. We see what is called evil in the world until its reasons for appearing is understood. Then it isn't evil in the world to that understanding and ceases to appear so. A man recently related the experience of his business going under in years past. It was awful, he said. That is, it was awful while it was happening. But now I understand so many things that I didn't understand then. It was the grandest lesson of my life. Now I appreciate things I couldn't before. His wife agreed that, in retrospect, it was the most meaningful lesson of her life as well. What was evil in the world as it happened turned into the grandest lesson of my life. Who can call that bad? But while these things are happening, it's so miserable, Bill. Don't you know? Yes, I know. Our anguish, like the dark night of the soul, permits us to know the peace that is real. We wouldn't know it otherwise. The real is eternal. The anguish, temporal and unreal. The unreal passes in time, disclosing a real that was there all the while. Its anticipation speeds the process. I know. Let us say this again because it is too simple for words, hence easily misunderstood. We look for good because God is good, and we are looking for God. We expect good because God is everywhere. Hence, there is good everywhere to be seen. We begin to see good because God is there to be seen, self-seen, and because when the pseudo-ego is understood, God is doing the looking. All that has ever been asked of us is that we be a faithful witness of the good that is round about. In Thomas, we hear Jesus talking to his disciples about the attitude of anticipation. Say to yourselves, on which day will they, the angels and prophets, come? That is, let one's attention be on the expectancy. Why not? It does wonders for us. The Man Who Stole the Chewing Gum. There are days to write and days to read. There are days to sit loose and free, days to dream and watch the grass grow and chase dogs out of the rose garden before they water something. Today I am remembering, thinking back to the time when contradistinction first came alive to me. One doesn't often see a thief in the act of stealing, but on this day a well-to-do friend came into the bakery, and I saw him steal a package of chewing gum. Obviously, he didn't know that my sons and I were watching from a table in the bakery's dining room. I didn't like what I saw. My first inclination was to use the scene as an example for my boys. Do you see that? That's not honest. That's stealing. We don't do things like that. But for some reason I held my tongue. Perhaps for the first time in my life I managed to say nothing about a distasteful sight. I was in the middle of my metaphysical period, the time when one has seen the mountain is not a mountain, but when one is beginning to wonder why some of the ugly scenes on the mountain keep reappearing. As metaphysical development goes, things were beginning to come full circle, from not a mountain to it's a mountain again. Anyway, I sat at the table with my boys, silently asking, what am I seeing? What do I really see if God is all and God is good? I looked on indignantly and felt abused, the grind very much in my belly. All this happened in the twinkling of an eye, of course. I can't afford to lose a nickel, I thought. My employees think they are merely careless when they spill salt or sugar on the floor, but I have to pay for every granule. That so-called friend of mine doesn't realize he's taking food right out of the mouths of my boys. But I continued to reason. If God is really all, that allness must somehow include the sights at hand. Somehow my friend isn't guilty. What am I seeing anyway? For once in my life, I asked God what was going on. As quickly as I asked, the answer came, almost as if I'd been shaken by the shoulders. The words popped into my head. Bill, what is dishonesty but the delineation of honesty? Then I heard, would you know what honesty really is if you had never seen the actions that make it plain? Would I? Well, as simple as it sounds, that's about what I thought, and as nearly as I can remember what came to me. I watched my friend go back to his table, slipping the block of chewing gum into his pocket on the way. That night I wrote in my journal about honesty, telling God I didn't need that kind of delineation anymore because I couldn't afford it, even a nickel's worth. All of this happened on a Sunday afternoon after church. The following Thursday, as I was sitting at the same table and putting the finishing touches on some bookwork, my friend walked in the front door and headed my way. Uh-oh, I said to myself. Help me hold my tongue, Father. Jack walked up and said, Hello, Bill. How are you? Fine, I answered, inviting him to sit down. He took a chair beside me. Did you see me here last Sunday, Bill? He asked. I admitted I had, biting my tongue. Then he began his story, and this is what he told me. All of his life he had been plagued by the terrible burden of kleptomania. He took great sensual delight in stealing things, small and large, valuable or otherwise. It didn't make much difference. His dresser at home was stuffed with things he had stolen over the years. He and his wife lived in perpetual terror that he would be found out some day and their lives ruined. Then he asked if I had seen him take the chewing gum Sunday, and I said yes. "I knew you had," he said. Then, and here's the wonder, he went on to say that a strange thing had happened since Sunday. This terrible urge to steal was perpetual, he said. It plagued him every day at the most unexpected times and places, and it was stronger than sex and virtually irresistible. But since the past Sunday, he had been free of it. He had gone nearly a week without this terrible urge. "Bill," he said, "I felt that you saw me and didn't condemn me. Whatever has happened to me since last Sunday has something to do with your silent forgiveness." Well, I hadn't condemned him. Rather, the night after it happened, I sat at my journal and thanked God for making honesty so apparent in my experience. This is the first time I can remember actually taking a negative experience and consciously turning it around in my head to the positive side. And then thanking God, the event, and the man who seemed to be the instrument for the lesson learned. At the time that I had called the thief by his new name, I was comforted. And with the comfort, I found the strength to dismiss the anger and condemnation, to forgive the scene and thank it. This turning around, I learned later, is what the ancients really meant by repentance. Jack went on to say that he had seen all the people who came into the bakery's coffee shop to talk philosophy. He didn't know what was going on or what I thought, but he wanted to be part of it. "Whatever it is good," he said. So Jack began to study the truth and became a good metaphysician along the way. He was never plagued with the terrible problem again. Such is the power of seeing the good in a situation, that is, in calling things by their right name. Not only was I comforted, but the action was synergistic. It reached out and helped my world. The Lady at the Laundromat. Years ago, in a hot, steamy little southern town, I was doing my laundry in the town's only laundromat. It was a dilapidated little place with puddles of muddy water on a cluttered, sandy floor and rickety machines making an ungodly clatter. In those days, it cost 15 cents a load for the washing machine and a nickel to use the dryer. I had just gotten my laundry under way when a country lady came in with a huge bundle of dirty clothes. She was dripping with perspiration, clearly very tired and very pregnant. She was accompanied by an obstreperous little boy tugging at her, yelling like a banshee, and running off in all directions at once. What a sight! There I was, silently declaring, "There is nothing but God going on in the world. There is nothing but good happening." And then that lady walked in with her uncontrollable, loud-mouthed little boy. Ah, so! I remember watching the mother carefully pinch open her coin purse and make calculations ever so carefully before she began her clothes. Clearly, she didn't have many nickels and dimes. She didn't have many pennies either. The little boy was into everything, yelling and shouting over the noise of the clattering machines. I was sitting there observing, trying to see something good about that busy ragamuffin, full of noise, who didn't seem a bit bothered by the devastating heat of an Alabama afternoon. Every few minutes, the pregnant mother shouted at the top of her voice, "Quit that!" or "Behave yourself!" But the boy heeded nothing. The mother was terribly uncomfortable, clearly at her wits' end. I sweated and observed and knew the truth, as the old saying goes, insisting that God was in charge of this scene too. Well, my clothes were about finished, and the lady had just put her tub of clean, wet clothes into the basket to move them to the dryer, when the little boy, still yelling and dashing everywhere, ran into her basket and dumped her clothes onto the muddy floor. Dismay and rage overtook her instantly. "Come here!" she screamed hysterically. The boy ran to me instead of his mother and grabbed the leg of my pants. "Come here!" the distraught mother screamed again, and the little boy knew he was damned if he did and damned if he didn't. Very slowly he started her way, and very quickly she lunged at him, grabbed him, and began beating him unmercifully. I am a soldier, and I have seen people kill one another. I know uncontrolled and senseless anger when I see it. The mother was clearly out of control. What was I actually looking at if, as all the holy books say in one way or another, God is all in all and there is nothing happening but God? What did I see? Illusion? Mesmerism? Immediately I asked within, and the answer arrived instantly, just as it did when I watched the man stealing the chewing gum. What did I see? The delineation of patience and love, negatively appearing, surely, but the negatives are not real, and the positives they delineate are real. So, I saw the delineation of the very opposite of the appearance. What else, if God really is all in all? Either God is all, even the present picture a part of that allness, or else God doesn't exist and we can end our search. "Thank you for making love and patience plain," I shouted over the yelling, the pounding, and the screams. "Thank you for making love and patience plain," I yelled again. Well now, even the machinery had stopped before the echoes of my shout were gone. It was as if I had shaken the lady or hit her. She stood looking at me with surprise and relief in her eyes, even joy. The boy's nose was running, his eyes full of tears, but he stood there looking at me, then his mother, and his nose stopped bleeding right before my eyes. What had I done? I had called the scene by its new name. We must eventually learn to make the turnaround without the constant sop, unreal, matter, illusion, dream, mortal mind. The turnaround is an absolutely necessary part of the repentance the holy books tell of. Disclaiming the reality of something doesn't make the turnaround, but the turnaround is necessary. To do such a thing is a very powerful exercise in this world of plastic imagery. You may wish to try it, but expect to be surprised at the power of it. Yes, you must try it. A short time later, as I sat in the little cafe up the street, jotting down my memories of the event before the sights and sounds and revelations could be forgotten, the mother and the little boy walked in, a look of pure love in their eyes. She stood there tremendously beside a table, peering once more into her coin purse, emptying its contents on the table. She found a nickel and enough pennies to order a piece of homemade cake and a scoop of chocolate ice cream. We watched the boy eat it as if he had never had such a wonderful day in his life. Looking for good in a situation allows us to call it by its right name. Dear reader, do you know what a marvel lies hidden in these words? A marvel that you can put to the test and see for yourself before the day is over. The Angry Truck Driver. During the energy crunch several years ago, I passed a service station that had just received a delivery of scarce gasoline. Cars were lined up around the block, waiting to get to the pumps. I drove in just as another row of pumps were being opened, or so I thought. Rejoicing at such good fortune, I pulled right up to the pump, the way one does at the grocery store when a new register is opened. I got out and began filling my tank, most happy I didn't have to wait in that long line. Then I saw I had made an awful mistake. A big one. A long line of trucks and cars was waiting for that row of pumps after all, and I had jumped in front of everyone. By the time I realized this, the man who should have been putting gasoline in his vehicle had climbed out of his truck and was heading my way, a huge hulk of a man with one of those muddy, battered pickup trucks with hunting guns mounted in the back window. His fists were clenched, and the veins in his neck were bulging. Behind him, people shouted and waved their arms, urging him to get up there and do something about this stupid guy, me. It seemed certain I was about to have my stuffings removed. What to do? Bill was about to get pounded into the pavement. Certainly, I had not intended to get ahead of anyone. I am accustomed to wonderful opportunities presenting themselves unexpectedly. So I was saying my usual, "Thank you, Father," when I saw the error of my ways, plus the anger coming relentlessly, inexorably towards me. What does one do in such a situation? Why do such things happen in our innocence? If God is all in all, and if God is purely good, and if I am indeed the very awareness of perfection itself, why does this sort of thing happen? And what did I see coming my way to do me bodily harm? What was really going on? In a twinkling, not devoid of terror, I heard myself saying loudly to the approaching man, "Thank you for making your patience and my stupidity plain." The huge man stopped in his tracks as if I had hit him with a medicine ball. "What'd you say?" he asked angrily. "Thank you for making patience so plain," I repeated, and then I quickly added what seemed at the time to make good sense. It looked like they had just opened the pump and I didn't know anyone was waiting for it. The man, thoroughly confused, seemed to surprise himself by saying, "I was about to make a fool out of myself, wasn't I?" "Here, take the pump," I said, but he told me to go ahead since my tank was nearly full anyway. "What the hell difference does a couple of more minutes make?" he asked. I thanked him, and the pump clicked off. I paid for the gas and had to drive around the block to pass the station again before getting to my road home. When I passed the station, several minutes later, the truck driver was still smiling at himself and his generosity to the poor little fool who couldn't see. Silly illustration, one might think. Coincidence, happenstance, dumb luck. Not so. I've been living the practice of calling things by their new name since this truth was revealed to me. I've watched the power and authority of the honest sound on the world's wind. I have seen its persuasion and potency. One does not use this tactic to take advantage of people, but it is used, as Lao Tse said, to infinity. We look at the scene, discern the real before our eyes, acknowledge it, thank it, and be grateful for it. Absolute wonders happen. Just knowing the truth isn't sufficient. We look at the tangible scene right here in the world and call it by its right name. There is good going on everywhere. Since God is all, there is nothing but good going on. But what is the good of knowing this if we don't live it in the world? The contrary of not living it appears as an increasing contrariness to contend with in our personal affairs. About the sins of the world. Overtone. Part 1. When subjectivism's real meanings begin to come clear to us, there is a period when, it is said, we take the sins of the world unto ourselves. What is meant by this? Simply that the earnest, ongoing seeker of truth solipsistically insists there is but one mind and begins to equate himself with the awareness of that mind. At the time it happens, this perception is essential and correct, it seems to me. But at this point we are prone to say, I am the author of all I see, or I am the author of all the discord I see, and it is up to me to get rid of this discord. This is the time of the Christ role, when we do take the sins of the world unto ourselves and become a willing sacrifice for all mankind. They are not guilty, but I am, apparently, if I see them incorrectly. This is not quite on target. There comes a time when we finally tire of this impossible battle we can't win, no matter how hard we try to play God. Here we are prone to withdraw from our groups and go into the Zen-like stance of absoluteness. Illusion, we say, of the evil of the world. Dream, it isn't really happening. But that doesn't alert the holistic picture of things either. We still watch ourselves grow old in the mirror of life, and in the end still find ourselves at the disposal of bedpans and hospitals, no matter how hard we've denied the reality of matter. What good has our absolute stance done for the world at this point in time and space? Very little or nothing. Oh, but for some who know that somehow there is truth hidden in all this mystery of religion, metaphysics, and mysticism, comes an answer that allows us to find our way out of the metaphysical trap of non-being, non-thinking, and the total denial of the senses. Lo, we move beyond the complexity of absolute metaphysics to find the child within us. One can find the child within without having read the first page of a holy book or without having the first conscious thought of God in his life. Oh, but the child tells us of God quickly, so that even our most scientific intellectualism isn't offended. Part 2. Metaphysically, one goes through many states and stages which, as absolutists, we deny even exist in truth. One of these stages is to blame oneself for creating the appearances. Another is to blame oneself for not having enough knowledge of the truth to avert the appearances, or insufficient faith, trust, and so on. Finally, at least here in the tangible world of people, places, and things, one perceives a greater truth behind the appearances and beyond metaphysics, explaining to one degree or another why the appearance exists and suggesting that it is not entirely illusory, but exists for one's own self-discovery, self-acknowledgement. Perhaps this is the time Jesus spoke of when he said that even the stones would minister to us. For myself, I manage somehow neither to affirm nor deny the evidences of the senses. Rather, I would do something like this. I declared and affirmed, in the presence of some apparently terrible situation, there is nothing but God and God's self-consciousness present. Then I went beyond that metaphysical stance to ask, how does this apparent situation I am faced with fit into such absolute perfection? Remember, for years I had said to myself, it doesn't fit into perfection, therefore it isn't real. It isn't really happening. And then I'd hang in there, trying to ignore the situation that seems so awful. If it went away, I'd thank God and call it a demonstration of God's power. If it didn't go away, I'd blame myself for not being knowledgeable enough or consistent enough. Only very slowly, line upon line, precept upon precept, did I learn to look at the appearing and see what it might represent within a great picture of perfect Godhead and perfect self-knowledge. When I did this, I began to understand what existed behind the appearings, and the appearings resolved themselves with more regularity, much as if I didn't need them anymore. I began to call this exercise calling things by their right name or new name. Religion has the ubiquitous devil, Satan, to fall back on and blame, while metaphysics rightly denies the existence of a real devil. The denial has done nothing to lessen the appearances of evil in the world. After enough honest examination, we are finally led to conclude, in agreement with many authorities, including the Bible, psychology, and a whole range of Eastern ideas, that the devil is partly, if not entirely, our own belief of a selfhood apart, fallen from God. That very belief is what our world experiences are educating us individually out of, which means that our old metaphysical notion that we might ourselves be the cause of our own apparent difficulties may be right. Who can deny that if I refuse to eat and drink, I'll quickly suffer the discomforts of thirst and hunger? If I fail to acknowledge the source of self, might I not bring unwitting anguish to my sense of self? But is it the incorrect sense of self that I want comforted and healed? Or am I learning about the real self? The bottom line here is that it isn't enough merely to disclaim the reality of evil, as metaphysicians are so prone to do at certain stages. It is enough only when we understand the reasons for everything appearing in and as our daily affairs, including the appearances of evil, devil, Satan. Then we begin living that new understanding, and in experiencing it, we bring harmony and peace to ourselves. Even then, we aren't finished until we have published our findings for our greater selfhood to see and understand as well. That is not the end either. Finally, we are made willing to let even that concept go in the face of whatever God is. For even the greatest dreams of human goodness are as nothing in the presence of Godhead. We are called to be willing to surrender everything before it, and at death we are forced to. But I am convinced The surrender can be made almost without need for that event. Eventually, if the prophets are right, we will see a time when death and its anguish do not stalk us relentlessly. Why not? Related Papers 41 to 45. About healing. Reader, please sit yourself down in a quiet place before you read this paper. Read slowly. Read expectantly. It is altogether possible, even likely, that something wonderful can happen. Why not? None less than the enlightened carpenter said, "What you expect, believing, you shall receive." Thousands of books have been written about spiritual healing. Countless articles and essays attempt to throw light on one facet or another of this fascinating subject. Words can hardly touch the hem of healing, but this paper can point to insights that have been especially meaningful to me and to those who have studied with me. Metaphysics develops its own areas of difficulty. Those places are peculiar and insidious, entrapping blind spots where those with the best intentions can walk in endless circles. This is especially true for those of us who fancy ourselves on the high road, the God is all road. Having left our organizations, for whatever reason, before we got the rudiments of metaphysics straight. An interesting subject by itself, how our personal arrogance, the me sense again, had us thinking we knew so much more than the churches were willing to teach, etc. One of the great stumbling blocks concerns the concept of demonstrations and the need for them as proofs of one's progress. That concept begins legitimately enough, "By their fruits ye shall know them," and ends as a stultifying entrapment wherein one circles forever if he isn't careful, looking for one healing after another until finally, in his last years of struggle, his metaphysics crumbles in the face of fear, frustration, and guilt, as if all the years of study were in vain. Why isn't my truth working for me now, is the question then. As appearances go, most of us began our study of religious metaphysics in order to, 1. Enjoy a more harmonious human experience, and 2. Learn something about truth along the way. The truth simply doesn't work that way, and, unfortunately, metaphysical literature doesn't try very hard to set the record straight. The adoration of God and the discernment of truth, which this love allows, are our first step and only objective. The healings, demonstrations, and confirmations are the added things along the way. Until we get this straight, we may just as well forget about healings. When the chips are finally placed on the table, as they must be for all of us, it will be the love for God that counts, and not our ability to manipulate the human scene. And though I could move mountains and have not love, I am nothing, said friend Paul. Love and love alone permits us to see and know the delicate distinction between the empty fulfillment of a human desire, sometimes called demonstration, and the grand confirmation that follows the knowledge that only God, good, is happening. The words here are inadequate, but your heart is understanding something, isn't it? Read on expectantly. These bits and pieces will help. The ability to manipulate the human scene from hell to breakfast is proof of nothing real, and is usually the glue that keeps one stuck to the wrong scene. Look at the wonders the hypnotist performs, or the psychologist, or the chemist. Hiroshima demonstrates the physicist's ability to manipulate matter. But what have all the manipulative machinations of these practitioners led to? Often only more anguish to be re-manipulated, and a greater desire to do it. On the other hand, the least confirmation of good in our daily affairs is a mighty declaration to, by the presence of God at hand. What's more, this good is felt right here where we are, and right now. In a recent letter which appears to have done its good work, I wrote, William Samuel's experience may seem miraculous to you, but that view doesn't exist because of Samuel's ability to change the scene around him. It exists entirely because of the confident expectation of good, God, continually self-confirmed as this experience. That is, I look for the good that is present. I expect to see it, and then I see it. If this is too simple, I'm sorry. It is just that easy. If one jumps into the river and expects wet, he sees wet. If one looks at God's earth and expects good, he sees it. This awareness, this life, is God's viewing. Long ago, I stopped taking account of Bill seeing anything on his own. I expect to see God confirmed everywhere, and I do. So can you. The mysterious paradox goes something like this. Ending the ludicrous attempt to manipulate the human scene to suit the me senses, fanciful lusts, and righteous desires, one finds the scene revealing, confirming the scene, and this may very well appear to be a greater manipulation of tangibility than could have ever been me dreamed or me imagined. Not trying to manipulate so much, we suddenly know what gentle good to do for others, and do it. This is love in action. Do you see? It is difficult to write these things. When the solipsistic, internal nature of the universe really begins to dawn within, one becomes aware of the heady ability to alter the entire world scene, even the universe. Yes, the universe is within consciousness. However, as Lao-tse points out, the world is already a perfect vessel, and whoever tries to improve it spoils it. For Jesus, this came as a satanic temptation, which he resisted. Yet, his ministry still included healing, and so does ours. The light of the Absolute discloses that, the human appearance of, the most direct path out of our illusory need into the demonstration of that need fulfilled is to affirm and trust the allness of Godhead here and now, thence to look around about with expectancy and find oneself living the confirmation that only good is going on. We, awareness, are not separate from God's self-confirmation. For goodness sakes, we are that event happening. The events of our daily affairs are much more malleable than most of us realize. In many respects, experience is the following confirmation of our beliefs and dreams, fears, and illusions. Like all tangibility, it flows behind, so to speak, like the wake of a ship. Tangibility is after the fact, as the photograph follows after the image that is photographed, as sound follows explosion, as the tree we see flows behind that which is being the tree. With this in mind, consider the following analogy. The daily world experience is no more than the wake of the real ship which precedes it. The wake is confirmation that a very good ship has passed along. Isn't it interesting how we get all caught up in the boiling, bubbling froth and foam, afraid of the waves, when all the while the wake, in its totality, proves that a ship has passed this way? It is also a wonder that we are forever attempting to effect changes in the wake, rather than looking to the perfect ship that life is. Mr. Samuel, my difficulty lies in the fact that I can't see the ship, but I certainly see the wake of my daily life experience. How can I see the ship? The answer to this question, beyond the scope of reason and logic, lies in ending the fractured look at the world experience and seeing the totality of it. The whole arena of scientific endeavor is an attempt of the me sense to understand what mind knows mind to be, and what mind knows awareness, life knowing, to be. The human sense of things seems unaware that this is what science is all about. Man refuses to reckon ineffability to be the basis of the matter he examines, or, like some metaphysicians, Eastern and Western, he calls everything a dream that isn't even happening. So, unmindful of Godhead, or God outside our calculations entirely, we weigh and measure the whirling vortexes of the ship's wake, believing them to be the real and true. Reader, we begin with God. That is, we begin with the perfect ship, and, to the best of our ability, walk lightly on the waters of the wake. All that is ever happening in the world is the grand and good confirmation that God is here, right now. The heart of us, the real of us, the child identity itself, sails aboard the ship. Indeed, some have said the child within us, the heart, is the ship of state. Good, evil, right, wrong, sickness, health, poverty, wealth, are the right or the left dualistic terms of the wake. But the wake, in its wholeness, is very good, because it confirms the presence of Godhead. Hopefully, these words will suggest how the confirmation of good is infinitely superior to the demonstration of human desire. We find goodness confirmed at every turn of the road, and are not inundated by the threatening waves we feared when we first began knowing the truth. Our real home is not in the tangible arena of effects from prior causes, but ahead of causes, on the ship. Reader, I well remember the many wonderful confirmations that happened for me when I first came to understand what this ship wake illustration suggests. Since then, my daily experience has grown into a constant expectancy of good, confirmed again and again every day with healings and more. It will be exactly so for you. It is really very simple. Just as Jesus said, we get what we expect, and what we expect is what we get. We expect good every minute because nothing but good is really going on. There is an especial joy awaiting those who overcome. It is something mysterious, and it has no name, but it is ours. It is us. I know it is attainable because it has found me. If I can see it here, after the life I have lived, anyone willing to pay the price will be found by it too. Part of the price is marvelously easy, doing as much to help others as we can. The old nature of us, caught in the swirl of its little world, moves irrevocably towards oblivion. The child of us moves straightway to source and finds the mysterious joy. The heart, like the prophets of old, is forward-looking. It anticipates good at every turn and perceives it. It does good for others and delights in it. Moses wrote, "He is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live." We look for confirmation of good. We find it. We are the prophet. We sing the song of joy and extend a helping hand to our world, while the spiritually blind wonder at the darkness in theirs. The receptive heart intuits a divine, supersensible inversion of things. Plotinus and Eckhart called it just that, the divine inversion. It is the preface to the tangible world, and it is very difficult to either write or speak of because it has no recognizable frame of reference. Whatever has been said of it sounds mystical and arcane until we listen to our own heart in the matter. Then it is, for each of us, sublimely simple, a strange excitement and deep joy. It is the goal of all honest disciplines, but the most distant and undeliverable dream of charlatans. It is an immediate and expanding gift for the self-surrendered, who take God to be all in all. Yes, it is a mystery that comes with healing on its wings, and so much more. Jesus said, "For where the beginning is, there shall be the end. Blessed is he who shall stand at the beginning, and he shall know the end, and he shall not taste death." The top-down messages that begin with Godhead and stay there are like golden arrows pointing to the ship. They are like the ship's undistorted image, glimpsed now and then midst the turmoil of the world's lake. The top-down message is a small but potent voice in a world awash with many, many voices. The alchemy of good. Looking for a fence to put around the yard, one begins to see fences everywhere. Looking for shrubbery, one suddenly sees shrubbery everywhere. That is the divine alchemy at work. Looking for tenderness, beauty, and love, one finds them everywhere. Looking for good, one finds good. That is the alchemy of God at work. The mystic of yore spoke of the gold, or the value, in everything. In the extremes of religious fervor, this was taken literally, giving birth to chemical alchemy. What was meant was that one could work the wonderful alchemy of God, good, in his daily affairs, and at every level of awareness begin to see beauty and goodness. The expectation of good is not a manipulation of the seen, as one is prone to believe when he parrots the words, God is all, therefore everything is good already, but is the anticipation of a confirmation that God is all, which we allow to appear however it may. Without the anticipation of good, we are not likely to see it, and without the confirmation, we don't know beyond intellectualism what good actually is. Dreams are subjective. A dream is a subjective happening. That is, it happens inside our head, within consciousness or awareness. The substance of our friend in the dream is dream, firing neurons or whatever it is that happens when one dreams and brings a mental image to mind. It is an internal event, not happening outside the head. This is a subjective event. From the beginning, thinkers have postulated that the walking around in the world experience is just as subjective as the dream in most ways, if not in every way. Objects may be outside of the head, but not outside of the experiencing awareness. That is, we can reach outside the body and touch the tree in the park, but the sight of the tree and the feel of the tree, when we touch it, as well as any thought we may have about anything and everything, are still within awareness. In this way, all things in our daily round are as subjective as the dream. Whether we see a tree or dream it, it is perceived as our own neurons, not anyone else's. One might say that all things are subjective simply because we never get outside of our own viewing awareness to see if the tree exists independently of the sight and feel of it. Or better, we concede that everything that is exists within the mind of Godhead. This brings to mind the wonderful remark of the old Chinese master who, addressing his students one morning, remarked that he had just had a wonderful dream in which he was a butterfly. Then, pausing a moment, he asked if it might not be possible that he was presently a butterfly, dreaming he was a man. Philosophers dismissed subjectivism in favor of the objective world long ago. It was patently absurd to view the world as mental. We may argue that the universe is happening within the subjective experience, but this is plainly not so because there is an objective reality as well, said one of the important voices of the world, just as though he could get outside his own awareness to prove his conclusions true. The thought that the plane of human consciousness might be included within a greater sphere of Godhead doesn't seem to have been argued by the philosophers yet. First thoughts of the round earth were dismissed as plainly not so by another important voice who was wrong. The earth is approximately round, of course, and our experience is more than approximately subjective. We might ultimately be led to comprehend it as omnijective. In apparent yes-no situations, philosophers, theologians, metaphysicians, and scientists somehow box themselves into the either-or, forgetting the other possibilities such as both, or sometimes neither. Considering awareness to be the action of the illimitable Godhead mind, one had best consider all possibilities as within the capability of illimitable and all-knowing mind. Omnipotence contains the ability to do all that can be done, doesn't it? Awareness, limited to subjective or objective, is limited awareness, hence not illimitable awareness at all. All this is a little like the pronouncement of an important voice from certain religious views, decreeing the possibility of a transcendent God, insisting on immanent instead, and making long arguments to prove the point. The simple fact that the ineffable is both immanent and transcendent and more simultaneously doesn't seem to have dawned yet. If classical physics can be said to be analogous to objective viewing, then quantum physics is analogous to subjective viewing. When we think subjectively, we are doing quantum thinking, embracing everyone and everything in the universe. Subjectivism will do for the world and its sciences what quantum mechanics has done for physics. The subjective view doesn't exclude the objective, but includes it to infinity and goes beyond, to all possibilities. We use them both. I think in terms of all life, but I still see the individual. One sees the pretty girl, but subjectivism lets him see the little girl in the old lady, and still full of beauty. The subjective view doesn't empty my world of dark and difficult passages along frightening trails, but it permits me, us, to walk them with brighter light, and then to make the way easier for the rest of ourselves to walk there as well. The Great Glass Pyramid. Years ago, someone wrote that all the people on the earth, if assembled in one place, standing side by side, would occupy a square mile of land. They would certainly cover more land than that today, but let us use that square mile for the sake of an illustration that will make a point. Imagine that all humanity is brought together into a great glass pyramid whose four corners cover a square mile of earth. The people are standing jammed together like young people at a rock concert inside a great crystal pyramid, all facing the center. Well now, how would each person describe what he sees as he looks up? Each one would see the four quadrants of glass coming together at the top. Let us suppose they can see stars beyond, including Polaris, the North Star, whose position remains constant, and are asked to give a description of the North Star's location. The people along the south wall of the pyramid see the star in one quadrant. Those along the north wall see it in another. Those who stand in the east of the pyramid make different measurements to plot Polaris than do those in the west. As a matter of fact, every man, woman, and child would have a slightly different version of the North Star's location relative to the great glass panels that come to a point above. Each person represents a unique point of view. Next, suppose that certain creeds and dogmas about the star's location developed through centuries. The east side view of things would certainly differ from the west side view, similar to the differing religious views in the world today. Further, most people are too busy with family and other affairs to look up and measure for themselves, so they have grown to accept whatever idea is popular in their own locales. Can't we see from this illustration how religious ideas, all pertaining to the same God, but seen through the eyes of differing cultures, have developed during the centuries before worldwide communication linked us all together? Man's personal views of his relation to Godhead are not unlike the Pyramid people's views of their relation to the North Star. Religious ideas generally refer to the same one, but have their own sets of proof for validity. And, in truth, every statement is valid, so far as its measure goes. Isn't it strange that some of the world's religions can perceive this difference and allow for it, while others stand like staunch old pines in the wind, refusing to give any other views an inch, claiming their own perspective is the only valid perspective of the ineffable? Can the reader see that all eyes pointing toward the top represent individual points of view and lines of thought? If so, let me show in a simple way how powerful subjectivism is. And remember, subjective thinking is the new wave of things to come for mankind. One person, having learned the top-down method of thinking and comprehending, the very basis for subjectivism, is like a person who has broken away from the masses and climbed to the top of the pyramid. His view is like a great eye at the top of the pyramid looking down at everyone looking up. The top-down view includes all the bottom-up views within itself almost simultaneously. The top-down view is quantum, whereas the bottom-up view is individual. Such is the advantage of subjectivism and its comprehension that the world exists within awareness. Subjectivism is to human thought what quantum mechanics has become to physics. Today we see the leading edge of science on the brink of discovering the subjective idea. They have found the experiment tied to the awareness observing the experiment. It is a start. Science will discover the power of subjectivism before religion does, it appears, and even before the metaphysicians who claim to know it already but don't know what to do with it. We guess the scientist will know because his arithmetic will suggest, insist, and cause him to prove. Does the eye at the top quarrel with the opposing views at the bottom? No. It understands the basis for the differences of opinion and understands the holistic reasons for mankind's behavior. Oh, but the top-down view would certainly object if one of the groups along the eastern or western wall went to war against its opposite numbers in the name of creed, dogma, and holy book. We discover the child within. The child takes us, more or less, quickly to the top of the pyramid, to the view that includes all views within itself. Down on the sandy floor of the pyramid, extremism in the defense or promulgation of anyone's holy book and or bottom-up view of the ineffable causes men in black to make strange utterances in the name of localized views of God and to call for holy wars that could destroy civilization. On the floor, one hopes that that won't happen. But from the top, one sees that something must happen among the warring, unloving throngs to call attention to the child's top-down view that understands and forgives. The prophets have all said to look up willingly or be forced to look up in an awful Armageddon. 2,000 years ago, Christianity came along to say, "Let that mind be in us which is also in Christ," the subjective view of things. But see how Christianity's dogmatic creeds are warring among themselves. Whatever happened to the child's view that Jesus and others gave their lives to tell about? We get the top-down view and live it on the sandy floor of life, right here in the objective view of things. How? We find the child within ourselves and run with it. We publish peace, our own knowledge of the child within, as we have been admonished to do. We finally understand the exclusivity and arrogance of unyielding creeds and dogmas that discourage the individual's climb to the top of the pyramid. We see why the objective views have labeled subjectivism silly solipsism, and subjectively, from the top, we see that one with God is a majority. The world unfolds within the subjective consciousness. About action and getting our subjectivism straight. In all Metadelphia, there is little written that calls for people to get off their rocking chairs and soft sofas to journey up the hill of self-confirmation, wherein their work becomes quantum for the whole world. The honest metaphysical textbooks written to date correctly address subjectivism, not action in the world. To really understand the inner nature of things, it is necessary for a time to turn from the usual emphasis on worldly action found in the objective studies. Metaphysics is intended to bring its students into a full consciousness of subjectivism, but this isn't happening yet. Getting one's subjectivism straight is like learning Einstein's equation. One must learn it and its precision if he expects to go out into the world and apply it. If one hasn't understood the rudiments of subjectivism, he can't live effectively, and he simply grinds away from valley to valley. Sam, what do you mean by getting our subjectivism straight? I answer. Let's say one has a flash of inspiration. He sits down and suddenly intuits something like Einstein's equation. Whammo! There is light. I have called this the glimpse and have spoken of that in detail. Then what are we to do? We are to set to build the understructure, the bridge from the intuitive truth to its proof in the world. I call this getting one's subjectivism straight. It is quite one thing to catch a glimpse of the subjective idea, the inner nature of the world, or the world's connection to the awareness that sees it, and quite another thing to get it all straight, clarified, and understood beyond intellectualism. Einstein struggled with the proofs of arithmetic for many years before he was able to come up with all the illustrations necessary to explain his glimpse. This is part of getting one's subjectivism straight, and this is what I say religionists and metaphysicians especially are weak in. We want the glimpse, but we don't know what to do with it when we get it. The ordinary scientist is most concerned with proofs. And what next? Then we set out to live our glimpse. When we see our glimpses results in our world of people, places, and things, we have had our confirmation. This is comparable to Einstein having to wait 20 years before the world's technology could build something that proved his equation was actually right in the world. The link between the glimpse and its application. All of these things are implied when I say that metaphysicians must get their subjectivism straight if they expect to see their world lifted up. Does this answer the question? Human stasis, getting comfortable in various bends of the river, brings the personal condition to undergo changes that hasten the individual's conscious move toward the divine rest. The equation again. We keep moving spiritually or perish in human unrest. We keep moving onward and the change is upward smoothly. We stop moving and the change forced upon us is enough to push us out of our comfortable places very uncomfortably. That is true at the individual level and equally true at the group, national, and world level. The great push at the group level has already begun in the world and its churchdom of old theology. It is soon coming in scientific and metaphysical circles simply because subjective studies are stuck where they are, without the child and without the equation. Human conditions delineate the divine alreadiness, the rest beyond movement. The present unrest in the world is every man's approaching self-discovery of the child within. Just as every dream is certain to end in time, so the rediscovery of the child is an inevitable consequence of the world's having forgotten it. Non-action in the metaphysical community. Action and non-action are not two separate opposing ideas. They are complementary sides of the same coin. Together, they delineate the divine rest. Metaphysics calls attention to the non-action or rest aspect of this two that are one, and thereby balances the objective view's extreme emphasis on action. But metaphysics, being a way of thinking, just as objectivism is subject to similar misadventures when it ignores half of its own nature. Metaphysical imbalance results in turning non-action into no action, thus enervating the expression of metaphysics in the world, reflecting that state of affairs, appearing as the individual metaphysician who does little or nothing for his world in the belief that his world is an illusion to be denied. Oh, what a round robin of hopelessness and helplessness this is! What is the answer? We live our subjectivism fearlessly in the objective world, and the whole world benefits.